Welcome, welcome all. Yeah, if you notice, it's not a stereo recording. You're only hearing my voice versus Elohim's nature. It's because one of the microphones have been misplaced, and so until it's found, you're stuck just with me. Apologies. Before we begin the second video of 14 Exodus, again, those beautiful pounding words. I want to repeat them again. Dominus pugnabit pro vobis, et vos taccipitis. Dominus pugnabit pro vobis, et vos taccipitis. Always remember, you stay united, you stay devoted, as we were offering the prayers for those afflicted by family, any sort of abuse, violations. Stay united with him, and he will protect you. And I used me as an example what happened from childhood to an adult. And it's just extraordinary. But to have that faith and believe, yeah, it gets testing, it gets trying, especially with peer pressure. I guess I can understand that. I've never had a problem with peer pressure, ever. But I can respect it, I guess. But even that should let you know maybe this isn't the correct path for me, because it is the opinion or the forces of man, which are simply temporal. And your 80 years of life go by quickly here. We left off. Our forefathers were complaining. We weren't fighting people. I mean, they had a lot of built-up energy, and an army was built, as I told you, 600,000 around there, militant strong. But to Moses, they gripe because to see this Egyptian army, which is just, yeah. So our Lord takes this, Moses, Father Moses takes this to our Lord. You know, his response is, "Why are you crying to me?" A sorrow, according to Saint Hierom, before I continue with this wonderful pointed dialogue, Saint Hierom, I grabbed, there's a wonderful quote from him. "A sorrowful heart, lamentably mourning for the people, is called crying to God. Why criest thou to me?" A sorrowful heart, lamentably mourning for the people, is called crying to God. Same thing, if you're crying to God for yourself, for your family, for your enemies, it's crying to God. Thank you, Saint Hierom. He instructs Moses, go and speak to those Israelis. And tell them to go forward. Why they? And when they go forward, I want you to lift up your rod. It's like, why Christ to me? Yeah, I've already argued with everything. Let's go. Do it. Why they stop it? I didn't tell them to stop. They stopped. So you can camp out there, but you see an enemy coming, what are you standing around for? He wants the people to use their heads, but they're just become so shamefully dependent on Moses and not lifting a hand to help him, to show some encouragement to him. At least he's not writing about it. Elohim bless Moses eternally what he's done for us. Lift up your rod and stretch forth your hand upon the sea. So he's on one hand with the rod, elevated above the ground, in the other hand, stretch it across the gulf and divide it. Pretty simple. Yeah, Moses stretched up, and lift your cane up and stretch your hand over the gulf in front of him and just divide it. After all, he did make him God of Pharaoh. God of Pharaoh. Still, this involves Pharaoh. Divide it so the children of Israel may go in the midst of what you divided, which will be dry ground. It's as though criest is teaching Moses how to use his godly powers given to him, as I just discussed in God of Pharaoh. Otherwise, and divided would instead read, and I will divide it. You notice that? He's got full faith in me. He is the fingertip. Well, his rod is the fingertip, but Moses is definitely the extension of our Lord. No doubt about it. That's why so many non-believers, other heretics of the Egyptian race, were flocking to the Moses training the way out because of what they saw. And that's why Jesus himself, and you'll learn this when we get to it, will say, blessed are those who believe and don't see. Because if Elohim would do that like every generation, every 10 years, every 100 years or so, boy, nothing. Can you imagine the how everyone would be getting along? Because it'd be fresh in our minds, as I keep saying, time is our enemy. Because we tend to forget. We want to forget. We're lazy. We become lazier as we depend on other things versus remaining firmly attached to Terah. And she will not let you down. This is where you're supposed to be sweating, and there's a reason for that. And as you're seeing, you should be seeing, any instruction given by criest should actually be taken seriously. So those of you who are following along, bravo to you. Please pass this along, because he is giving us instructions. Shame on us for not adhering to them. It's pretty loud and clear if you're staying with us. He continues to tell Moses, I will indurate the heart of the Egyptians to pursue you. Did you hear that? It's the first time where he doesn't say Pharaoh. I will indurate the heart of the Egyptians to pursue you, which is telling you what's called a mass hysteria or a mass sin. This is a perfect example of following a maddening leader in the frenzy without stopping and asking yourself, why? Any logical soldier, I would say especially an Egyptian officer, an educated soldier, would stop and say, wait a minute, why are we doing this? Our God just got its tail whipped 10 times, and now he's taking his people with him. But it's because of this. I will indurate the heart of the Egyptians. And they're already frenzied by the Pharaoh and his inner circle. All those, they right away, yeah, what do we do? So now this grew, this multiplied so fast. You see this sort of frenzy in nations with demonstrations. And people would just grab on and follow, especially if they're being paid. But being misled, especially in a world where genuine knowledge is so readily available. But I would still recommend the library because it was always my saving grace. Children, please take that advice, if you will. I will be glorified in Pharaoh, is what he tells him, and all his hosts, his chariots, and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know who's Lord, who's God. And you shall be glorified in Pharaoh and his chariots and his horsemen. He's quite distinct. And I think he's mentioning this because of the insults he's received. For this man to pretend to be a god, and he knows well he isn't, and to use our Lord's beast and the knowledge of inventions of chariots against God. This is why he's mentioned it. Yeah, well, you're coming at me with what I gave you as gifts, and now you're going to die with them. It's kind of a hint towards people who have this accumulation of wealth or to take money and never give back, and always just take and take and take. All right, the angel of God that went before the camp of Israel. I'm not sure when he was introduced, this angel of God, but it's written here in verse 19, and the angel of God that went before the camp of Israel. So this is my conclusion on this. Every time Moses and Aaron left his brothers and sisters, our Lord left an angel there, so they're never left unguarded. And to keep rumors and other things somewhat limited. He knows the scare, this fear, and this doubt is always going to rise. He knows this already. But that's my conclusion on this. But like I said, many of our questions get later answered. Be patient. But what are your thoughts on this? So this angel went before the camp of Israel, and he moved himself. Instead of being in front, this angel now appeared behind the descendants of Jacob. There was also something else in front. Remember the guidons? He was guided by two things, two columns, one by day, one by night. Think. Fire, that's night. Cloud, day. It's daytime. So the angel goes back there and he takes that cloud with him. Yeah, it's just not a guidon. You're going to see her in a second. This is just so wonderful. So he takes this pillar of the cloud and he stands between the Egyptian camp and the descendants' camp. And to me, and to others before me, this is such a splendiferous portrayal of protection of angels. And I am before you, beseeching you to believe him as one who has been personally saved by them 6 times. Now I envision in this scenario, I envision our Lord's mighty angels equipped with maybe monstrous bows as he sits perched in dark clouds above the camp. And each time a section of the Egyptians moves towards the Israelis or even towards one another, the angels lets this lightning bolt loose against the invaders. For the Egyptians that night, there was just utter darkness. For the Moses camp, they had the opposite, illumination. But when Moses stretched forth his hand upon the sea, our Lord did take it away. He takes this dark cloud away. Why? Because this mighty, omnipotent, burning wind blowing all the night turns it into the dry ground that the water's been divided. So you have, I think I drew a little sketch for you. Hold on a second. You have this dry ground, and here's the Gulf, and this is where the Egyptians are camped. And Moses stretches forth his hand across this Gulf, which leads to the Red Sea this way. And so here's the descendants of Israel walking through dry ground as this northern wall of water, the southern wall of water is acting as a beautiful bridge for them. And this wind, this column that he took from here, that's keeping the Israelis who were camped out here on the beach between Egyptians, he takes this column and it turns it into this mighty wind. so that the ground is instantly dry, as well as giving you 2 columns, 2 walls of water. That's how they're able to move through swiftly. Somebody's coming up from behind. The Egyptians pursuing. This is what the Pharaoh went after them. I call that, as you can see there, the attacking force. His elite chariots, other chariots, and the horsemen going right on after them. Morning watch was come. So this has been going on for some time. Don't forget, this is a mobile city moving through this bridge between water that Elohim had just created. And this is moving just as fast as they can because they're scared, but Elohim has given them so many advantages. Now they have the wind at their back as well. You have to think about these things. So this mighty warm wind is keeping them warm. It's keeping them protected instead of being cold between these 2 freezing cold. You'd be in an ice box between 2 huge columns of water. But this is all the stuff that's going on here. And if you just sit back and think about this, this is just marvelous. Such a beautiful story and all the things that are happening. So yeah, the Israelis have the wind at their back. Things are moving along sailingly. But yeah, the Egyptians, the front, the attacking guard is taking advantage of this. But then it stops. So you have this wind, all of a sudden the back end of it like automatically stops. It just divides itself. So you have a front end of the wind still helping the Israelis and keeping the water up, but behind it ceased. And guess what? That dry land that's been underneath their feet turns into, well, have you ever been on the beach, low tide, river, lake? It's pretty muddy, right? Ask the mosquitoes, that's why they're there. Yeah. Those elite chariots and horsemen, yeah, they were having problems. Chug, chug, chug. You remember the apocalypse? It's similar to John's prophecy in there, in which it's written that so many of us, as they're blindly lead, as these Egyptian, as I was talking before, this Egyptian army's blindly following their leader. John's prophecy states that many of us will blindly, sometimes fervently follow blasphemous leaders right down to the world's end. And that's him prophesying. That's coming. All right, so there's mud coming on, there's all this resistance. Finally, someone speaks up from the Egyptian crowd and say, hey, let's get out of here. Flee from Israel, for the Lord is fighting for them against us. Duh. Before we close, you should note that Judith in the Apocrypha, we discussed, it was also told by Captain Achior to the Assyrian military leaders. Same thing. Let's flee from, don't get involved if their Lord is fighting for them, if he's not upset. And look what happened with that. All right, until next we meet. And if you haven't read it, I encourage you to do so. It's already on there. Judith, Book of Judith from the Apocrypha and the Old Testament. Till next we meet, let's find out what else is going to happen with these pursuers as well as our forefathers. Until then, Pax Vobis, and don't keep this knowledge for yourself.